Well, when I was teaching elementary instrument, well, not so much elementary instruments, but elementary band, I would take a different instrument every other week and play it in class. So I'd sit with the flutes one week, and then the clarinets another week, and then the trumpets and trombones. And so and one thing it did was it showed the kids that I could do what they were doing and showed them how to do it, which was the most helpful thing I could do for the students.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. Are you planning to travel with your group sometime soon? If so, please consider my sponsor, Kaleidoscope Adventures, a full-service tour company specializing in student group travel. With a former educator as its CEO, Kaleidoscope Adventures is dedicated to changing student lives through travel, and they offer high-quality service and an attention to detail that comes from more than 25 years of student travel experience. Trust Kaleidoscope's outstanding staff to focus on your group's one-of-a-kind adventure so that you can focus on everything else. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now, on to my next guest, Anthony Mazzaferro. Anthony, so can you tell the listeners who you are and what you're doing right now?
I'm Anthony Mazzaferro. I'm a band director at the Orange County School for the Arts. I direct the Frederick Fennell Wind Ensemble. I play tuba in several groups and teach tuba privately.
Excellent. I've had a lot of tuba players on this show, and I've posited before to other guests that it's because you sit in the back and see everything.
Well, I grew up at a time when there were no cell phones, of course. So when I would go to rehearsals and have to wait to play my piece, I would just get study scores.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And follow along and start seeing is the conductor going to stop at this point? What exactly is the conductor going to do about this problem? Is he going to come back to it? So I learned a lot by actually waiting to play. So I guess that's why tuba players sometimes have more insight into things, because we listen more. We have to.
That's the excuse I give when I'm in my community band rehearsals and I miss an entrance, is I was watching everyone else.
Yeah, I was so enamored with your sound, I forgot where I was.
So, Anthony, can you tell everyone your origin story? How'd you get started in music and the tuba?
Oh, well, we didn't have an elementary band or anything in San Francisco where I grew up in the 60s. So we had general music, and so I always loved it when that came up on the chalkboard that we were going to have it that day. And in the sixth grade, when we were getting ready to go into junior high, we only had a choice of a couple of electives. And one of those was art and the other was music. And the way they determined what class you were going to be in is some teachers handed out paper and pencils towards the middle of sixth grade, I guess. And they said, draw a tree. Put your name on the paper and draw a tree. So I did that and drew a tree, and they put me in band. So that tells you about my art skills right there. And so we started in the seventh grade, and I have a twin brother. So he's also a music teacher and a bass player, double bass player. And so we had our tonsils out missed the first 2 weeks of seventh grade. And got back, and my junior high teacher, Doug Pleasure, walked in and said, I want to play trumpet, because that was the first time that Herb Alpert was a big deal. And he said, I don't have any trumpets. And I said, what about French horn? He says, I don't have any French horns. And honestly, I looked over at the woodwinds and they were squeaking and squawking. And I said, oh, I don't want any part of this. And so I was pretty exasperated. I said to him, I said, well, what do you have? And he said, I've got this. And he went over to this closet and pulled out a 1939 Conn E-flat tuba, which I swear said U.S. Navy on the inside of it. And I said, what is it? He goes, well, it's a tuba. I said, well, what do I do? He goes, well, you just go sit in the back and I'll be by a little later to show you how it works. So he came by and showed me how it worked. And I sat there, maybe played one note the whole time. And went home and Mom said, well, what did you do in band today? I said, well, he handed me a tuba. And she said, oh, that's nice. And that was it. I started on it. He told me if I stuck with it, I could get the gold-plated tuba one day, which, was just brass. And so I stuck with it. There was a time in the 8th grade where I got kind of bored with playing long notes. And so I said, look, I got to do something else. And he was a very smart man, Mr. Pleasure. And so he handed me an oboe. Said, try this. Well, the first day I couldn't get a sound. The second day I got a sound. And the third day I gave it back and went back to tuba. And I haven't looked back since. But my respect for double reed players went up immensely when I was 13 years old.
Well, that begs the question, I guess. Why did you stick with it? I mean, we see kids. We give them these instruments, and we know that we're trying to give kids who have sort of a certain amount of motivation and want to continue on an instrument, but it doesn't always work out. So, what was it about that tuba that made you go home and practice more and get better so quickly?
Well, yeah. The sound, it was a big sound and deep and rich. My father's voice was a bass baritone. So I was really drawn to that kind of low frequency, I guess. And, that was it. I mean, I just loved the sound of it.
At what moment in high school did you know that you were going to become a professional musician or a music teacher? When did that sort of moment, that aha come?
Well, it wasn't in high school so much, but it was, I spent... my junior year was up at the Cazadero Music Camp in Northern California. It's about an hour and a half northwest of San Francisco. And we're sitting in rehearsal one day. It was in July. We were playing, it was 1972. We were playing Robert Russell Bennett's Symphonic Songs for Band. And there's a beautiful chorale moment right in the middle of the second movement. And that's when I decided, this is what I want to do. And so after I got home from that summer at the music camp, I started practicing 2 hours a day and getting real serious about what I was doing.
Reading your bio, you went to San Francisco State?
I did, yeah.
Did you go as a music ed major or a performance major?
Well, they didn't have it differentiated. You were just a music major back in the early 70s. And at the end of your sophomore year, you had to pick a track if you were going to go more music ed or more performance. Well, I was fortunate enough to be able to do both tracks. So I played a recital, took music ed classes, learned all the instruments. It was great. It was a lot of work. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. It was school at 7:30 and home at 10:30 every day. But it was worth it. I would do it again in a second.
So after you finished at San Francisco State, did you teach initially, or did you go on? And I saw that you have a master's degree.
I do. I was very interested in learning more about conducting. And so our band director at San Francisco State was Edwin Cruz, who was a Michigan graduate. And so I walked into his office one day and I said, he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I'd really like to get a master's in conducting. And he says, well, you're going to go to Northwestern, you're going to study with John Paynter. And I said, who and where? I had no idea who he was. I had no idea where it was. And so I went home. Well, I went to the library and looked up the microfilm on the school because, and I applied. It was the only graduate school I applied to. And at that time, they did not differentiate between band and orchestral conducting. It was just instrumental conducting. So the audition pieces for Northwestern were the Hindemith Symphony, Any Movement, and Brahms' Third Symphony, Any Movement. So what you did was you went and auditioned, and then they decided what track you were going to be on. So yeah, it was an amazing experience to be there. I would do it again in a second.
Yeah. So what was that like studying with John Paynter? I mean, he's a legendary figure in the band community.
Yeah. Well, if you knew what you were talking about and you'd done your homework, it was great. But I saw people try and what's the delicate term? BS their way through a lesson or a class, and it was not pleasant.
Yeah, I've heard that before about him. Other guests have said that you had to know, and he would test you on the spot.
Oh yes. There were only 3 of us in the conducting class, and the questions got deeper and deeper the more you answered. Mm-hmm. And so if you could get through his line of questioning and convince him that you really had studied your piece for that particular class session and the composer and theoretical knowledge and all of that comes with it, then everything was great.
Yeah.
So I just made sure I had my act together every time I walked into class. Yeah, I didn't want to be in that situation.
Yeah, well, I don't know if we call that fear or the fear of disappointing someone, but it's a powerful motive.
Yeah, it's powerful, but it wasn't so much out of fear. He just wanted to make sure that if you walked out of that school with a degree, that you knew what you were doing.
Right.
And I think for him, it came more from that than trying to beat you down or anything of that nature. I never had that experience. But he was organized. One time he had a score for 1 hour and literally learned it in 1 hour. It was pretty impressive to watch.
So what else did you take from him from that time at Northwestern? Is there something that you use in your teaching today that you learned from that time? Rehearsal techniques, pacing in rehearsal. He never wasted our time, and how to organize your score so that you conduct it with a minimum amount of study. Marking a score, and I think that's one thing I see from young conductors today is they don't give enough time to actually preparing the score so that they can conduct it. He had a system for working that out, so I still use that today. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't have a formal conducting degree, but I do have a composition degree. So when I study a score, I'm looking mostly at formal things. I can see it pretty quickly because I'm used to to working through big things. But do you have any advice for maybe some of my listeners who are younger who they could use for score study or score preparation?
Well, certainly he looked at it from a couple of different angles. One was theoretical format, knowing the actual form of the piece harmonically and as well as presentation of the form, and then marking cues and things of that nature that would be important to you as a conductor so that you could really help the players and assist the players with playing the music. He was very big into understanding what, as a conductor, understanding what your role is and what's your ultimate goal. If your ultimate goal is to present the piece in the fashion that you and the composer see fit, then how can you best conduct that so that those meanings can be revealed? So I think I still use that today. But a wonderful man, sense of humor that was so dry that he was just something else. He had me come back in 1990 and teach for a week at his summer program, so I enjoyed that very much.
So after Northwestern, did you go immediately to your doctorate, or did you teach?
No, I taught for 4 years in the Mount Diablo Unified School District in Walnut Creek, Concord area.
Sure.
It was my first job I got right after Prop 13 was put into action in California. So music budgets were getting slashed and teachers were leaving the state. And so this job came up. So I moved back to California and literally got laid off every year for 4 years.
Oof.
And, I'd have to wait for the state budget to be enacted before I could find out whether I would have a job again. And so I had a friend of mine who was at Arizona State, and he said, look, it's a pretty good program, and you can take summer classes and you can sort of tailor it to what you want to do with your career. And that seemed very appealing to me. And you could take classes over the summer. Well, I had no idea how hot it was in Phoenix, Arizona in July. So the idea of going to school there didn't disturb me until I got there, in which case that was a different story. But so I applied to, in 1983, I guess I applied to start in the summer of 84. And so they called me one day and said, look, we've looked over your resume and your records, and we want to know if you would want to come full time on a scholarship. As I was holding my fourth pink slip in my hand from the school district, I said, yeah, I think I can do that. So went off to Arizona State after I'd taught secondary education for 4 years.
I've gotten to know a lot of the people in the tuba community fairly well. Uh-huh. And I saw that you studied with Dan Perantoni, who has an office.
I did.
So what was it?
That was, well, go ahead.
I was going to say, what was it like to study tuba with Dan Perantoni?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't go down to Arizona State as a tuba major.
Right.
But you had to audition for the bands because I wanted to play. I wasn't going to stop playing. I mean, I'd worked so hard to get to this point.
Right.
So I went and auditioned for the bands, and Mr. Perantoni was there. And I got done with my audition, and he said, what do you do on Mondays at 10 o'clock? I said, well, I don't have any class at this moment. And he said, well, good. You have tuba lessons starting Monday at 10 a.m. I said, well, Mr. Perantoni, I'm not a tuba major. And he spoke to me just like an Italian father. And he looked at me and said, you have a tuba lesson starting Monday at 10 o'clock. And, yes, sir. I'll see you right there. And I would always go a half hour early to see if the person before me would show up.
Oh, okay.
And so there were just a couple of times when that person was sick and canceled their lesson, and Mr. P would look out the door, and I'd be standing there, and he'd say, come on in. Uh-huh. And so I would sometimes get an hour lesson that way.
Sure.
Just being there. But it was great. I mean, he really taught me about the specifics of becoming a great brass player.
Yeah, he's legendary.
Yeah, he is the consummate teacher and educator and performer. So that was fantastic. And in his studio at Arizona State, he had a picture of him digging his VW Bug out of a snowdrift. And I said, "What's up with this?" He goes, "Well, this was one morning in Illinois when he was teaching there, and I keep it on my desk to remind myself never to go back." And of course, he went back to Indiana.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I have reminded him about that photo and asked him where it is. But we got along great. He, being Italian, I understand the molto espressivo that he was trying to get us to play with the Concone and Bordoni etudes, and he really, really taught me how to approach playing the instrument and be able to teach it. So I'm always grateful to him for that.
So how about the wind studies there? The point of you being there. I know tuba's fun, but
yes, it was great. Richard Strange was our master teacher, and he and John Paynter didn't always see eye to eye. So my first couple of weeks at Arizona State in the academic semester were not pleasant. I couldn't give a downbeat correctly, and finally one day in class he said to me, "Well, I don't believe that all beats are downbeats." And that was a big thing with Mr. Paynter. And I just looked at him and said, "Well, I don't believe it either, okay?" And from that moment on, he lightened up on me, and we had a good relationship after that. But again, I never met anyone who knew more about the instruments than Richard Strange, Dr. Strange. And one of the things that he impressed upon all of us was that the better you know the instruments, the easier it is for you to teach, and the easier it is for you to understand the process of playing these instruments and how you can have empathy for what players are going through as you conduct through rehearsal.
Yeah, that's an absolute truth about being a teacher of winds, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I wish more young people that were coming into the profession would understand that just because you've passed the woodwind class or the brass class, that your knowledge of this has to go much deeper.
I can do that with all the instruments, but I have a very small program, so I don't have any double reeds. So I don't get much practice with the double reeds. It's an unfortunate thing.
Yeah, well, elementary, we had flute, clarinet, saxophone, trumpet, and trombone. Those were the instruments that we were teaching at that point. Yeah.
Yeah, I start those 5 instruments because I teach at a 4th through 8th grade school. I should tell you that. And so there's compulsory 4th grade band. So I start with those 5 instruments. And then in 5th grade, they can add percussion and any of the other instruments, the color instruments, so-called. Like I have some trumpet players that switch to baritone, euphonium. I have horns,
sure.
and I get a good number that switch to percussion of course. But it seems to work out pretty well because, then my percussionist can read music.
I would give anybody that wanted to play drums in an elementary band, I gave them a rhythm and time check to see if they could pass that, then we gave them a couple of sticks. Otherwise, maybe you better stick to your instrument.
Yeah, I kind of watch them through the course of the year and evaluate that myself. But what was your check? What did that look like for someone who's listening? And
I would clap some rhythms and then have them clap them back to me. And then I had a sheet that had 4 or 5 different rhythms. And I would have them read it and go over it. And if they could figure that out, then I knew that they could read rhythms. Then that was a start. So they had to play things back to me, and they had to read some rhythms on a sheet of music paper.
All right. So tell me about after Arizona State. Now you mentioned that you taught elementary music in
I did in Palo Alto. Yeah, Palo Alto district.
Okay, that was after the doctorate. Before was at Mount Diablo.
Yes.
Yeah. I should take an aside. I did my undergraduate at Chico State when Dan Heastan was there.
Oh, Dan, what a wonderful conductor he was.
He passed away my junior year when I was there.
Yes.
And
that was sad.
Yeah, Dan was great. He was such a remarkable musician and man. He was so good about being able to tell us as students what we needed to hear.
Well, I think that's the key, and I think today a lot of younger teachers are more worried about how the kids are feeling rather than being honest with them about what they need to do to get better.
Mm-hmm. He could be severe at times, though. I mean,
he came from that ilk. Yeah,
his rehearsals were, there were tense moments in those rehearsals. If you didn't know your part and you weren't playing in tune, he would get on you.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Kruth would reseat the clarinet section. He'd go right down the line and say, okay, you move here, you come up here. And
oof, that's tough.
Yeah. Well, it was
different era. You're right, though. It is a different era.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me about the teaching in Palo Alto after your doctorate.
Well, I taught at 6 elementary schools. It was a team approach. It was a new way of doing elementary music where a team of us would go into a school. The teachers would get a prep period, and we would just take over. And we had everything from beginning instruments to elementary school, 6th grade band and general music. So the teachers liked it because they got extra time to prep for the rest of their day, and we got to have the entire school involved in music, which created a very robust program for the city of Palo Alto because every kid was getting elementary music instruction in strings started in 4th grade, and then wind instruments in 5th, and then elementary band in 6th grade. So it was great. My biggest fear teaching elementary music was getting rear-ended on my way to another school, because if I couldn't get in my trunk to get all of my instruments and music, I couldn't teach. So to this day, I still look in the rearview mirror at stop signs because I get a little nervous. But it was fantastic. I mean, to see, I got a lot of joy out of teaching elementary music, because to see a kid who couldn't even know how to put an instrument together or a trumpet mouthpiece in the right end, and then by the end of the year, they're playing full pages of music, was really exciting to me. It was really heartwarming.
Yeah, I love teaching my 9-year-old and 10-year-old 4th graders. They're so visceral.
Well, and there's a joy that they're not worried about not being cool or anything like that. They're just excited to realize that they're creating something. You're the one making this sound happen.
I love their honesty too. It's the most awesome thing.
Well, yeah. Sometimes, yes, their
Sometimes
honesty can be quite revealing.
But I listen, the kids are so funny the way they'll often be like, well, that sounded terrible, but I'm having so much fun. That's kind of like,
right. It's like the kid, who's got Cheerios all over his face, but is still living eating Cheerios,
But yeah, it's really fun to teach that age for sure.
Well, yeah, and the method books now are so much more interesting that they really engage the kids, which is fantastic. And then so I did that in the mornings, and then in the afternoon I went to the high school, at Gunn High School, where I taught two symphonic band, concert band, beginning instruments, and AP music theory. So that was my assignment.
That's early in the days of AP theory, though.
Yes, in fact, it was fun to teach it, and in fact, one of my colleagues at Palo Alto High School was on the national committee for the AP music theory program, and so in the early, this would be the late '80s, they started adding more and more of a ear training component to it. Quite frankly, because too many students were passing the exam. So they decided to make ear training the separating the wheat from the chaff kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, having taught theory for a long time, I know all about that.
Sure. And I taught theory and ear training at Fullerton College for 29 years, so I understand that as well.
Yeah, it's soul crushing.
Kids, you got to hear a major triad to get out of this class. I'm sorry, but that's how it is.
Well, one of the reasons why I did leave the college classroom was because teaching theory every morning, 5 days a week, theory and oral skills, it can be really frustrating because the kids come in sort of predisposed to be unhappy, as opposed to the fourth grade musicians who come in, excited. So there's a certain energy that's different in that.
Well, yeah. And I think part of the issue, as I saw going through this time, was that the students were not listening to tonal music. So when you played chord progressions that we would think are pretty common, they had no idea what they were sounding like or have anything to support that.
So tell me about that. So how long were you in the Bay Area before moving down south?
I was there 3 years back from Arizona State, and I was sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon, and Terry Suma, who's a masterful teacher at Foothill College and San Rafael High School for many years, called me up now he's a jazz musician. So for him to call me up before noon on a Sunday was really interesting. And he said, look, I just came back from judging a Orchestra College Jazz Festival, and there's an opening at Fullerton College that I think fits what you do. And I said, well, I'm very happy in Palo Alto. I'm very happy teaching and the kids that I get to work with. And he said, well, look, I told him you were going to apply. Well, I still have so much respect for Terry Suma that I said, okay, I'll apply. And when I was really trying to get a college job, I would send programs and tapes and so many ancillary materials. And for this, I just sent a cover letter and a resume. I said, here's what I'm teaching. Here's what I'm doing. If you want to talk to me, here's how you get a hold of me. Well, they asked me to come down and audition, and there it was. So 29 years later, I retired. But it was all the things I like to do. It would have been undergraduate theory and ear training, survey history class, bands, tuba and euphonium.
It's a great gig.
It was a great gig. And to teach students who really wanted to get involved in the profession, but maybe didn't have all the benefits that other students might have had, and to get them on that track and that process was really one of the most gratifying things that I've done in my career. I wouldn't have traded a thing being there.
My wife and I often talk about it. She's a tenured professor at a university of cello, tenured professor of cello. And so I often tell her that if I were to go back to teaching college, it would have to be either a very small liberal arts school or a community college.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the students came to us, maybe not getting into their first choice, and were concerned about how this was all going to work out. And we would just put them on a path. And every student that walked into my studio, I said, look, if you just do what I'm telling you to do and the way I'm telling you to do it, I can promise you in 2 years, people will be fighting over you as a transfer student.
Right.
And so the ones that listened did great.
So tell me about your years at Fullerton. So what did you learn while you were there? What did your program look like? I'm trying to get a sense of what that became while you were there.
It was when I took over the band, there were 17 students on the roster. So it was a lot of recruiting, a lot of cajoling, telling students this is going to be great, but you got to get on board with this. And when I left, we had between 60 and 75 students in the daytime program, which was pretty rare for community college to have.
Was that a pretty standard number for most of the time?
No, it was 60 to 75. Yeah. It was a lot of recruiting, and when I first was looking at the job, I looked at their class schedule. I didn't look at their catalog so much, but I wanted to see what they were actually teaching. And one of the things they still offer and do at Fullerton College is they completely offer the first 2 years of what any student would take at a university. So that was very attractive to me as a potential faculty member. Was like, yeah, these guys are really serious about what it is that they're doing and the amount of students that are involved in it. So. Fullerton, I taught, there was a community band, which I conducted, and then a daytime student wind ensemble, and did that forever. I loved it. Taught tuba and euphonium. Depending on the semester, I would teach Harmony 1 and ear training, or I taught the survey music history class. Sometimes I did both, depending on the scheduling. It was fantastic. I think one of the things that I think young teachers are not doing in their rehearsals is bringing in the theory aspect and the history aspect to what it is they're doing with their kids. I think the idea, it was in the 50s, it was called comprehensive musicianship. And I just wish that more teachers were really bringing all of that knowledge into their classroom.
Yeah, this is a movement that has sort of gone up and down over the past 50 years.
Yes.
I think it's coming back a little bit, though, based on what I'm seeing.
I hope so, because it makes things so much easier for the student to understand why they're playing what they're playing, or how these sounds interact with each other.
Mm-hmm. How young do you advocate something like that?
Oh, I think it can start certainly middle school. You can always give them a little something about a composer, and then, it all goes back with theory to tension and resolution.
Right. All right.
And how do these sounds interact with each other to create the feelings that we have as a musician? I think that can start at any age.
Yeah, and as you know, form is just a matter of whether something sounds conclusive or inconclusive, and how that's the hierarchy of that. It's easy to teach to a kid. You can teach that to a fifth grader.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to use language as a way of showing them what's happening in the music. You go halfway through a sentence and stop, or then you take a pause and continue. And, so all of this is related, I think, to speech and musical language.
So how about composers? Did you have much chance to work with composers during your time?
Well, we were on several commissions, as part of commissions, James Stephenson, Frank DeKelly, Roger Chichi, Julie Giroux, Adam Schoenberg, Ralph Holtgren, Jan van der Roost, certainly Roger Nixon. He was really my idol since my undergraduate years. And Ron LoPresti, who I had for several classes at Arizona State, worked with him and talking about Elegy for a Young American. And, we talked about things that weren't in the score that should be brought out and interpreted a certain way. So that was always very exciting. Working with composers is great. I've never worked with a composer who was so adamant about what they wrote, that they weren't interested in. And is there a different way to do this? Is there an easier way to write this so the musicians could play it? I think in general, composers want their music played, and they are really interested in what the collaboration between conductor and composer should be.
Yeah, absolutely. What value do you think having a composer around adds for the students?
Well, it's a living, breathing person, and I think the most working with a composer with the students is so valuable, because look, this person's alive, and to me, when you have the students interact with a composer, everything becomes more personal, and everything that they write has meaning. And so it's really important then that you really understand that this is not just squiggles on a page, but this is a living, breathing document that we have to come to life. And when you have a composer come in and work with you on that, or whichever way you can get them to be a part of your art rehearsal, is really the best thing to do. It becomes a living, breathing thing, and the kids can put a face to it. So to me, that was always valuable.
And so what are you doing now with the Orange County School of the Arts?
Well, I'm directing the Frederick Fennell Wind Ensemble, which is a group that meets twice a week for an hour and 10 minutes. I've done it for 3 years, and it's really a joy to teach these students who are incredibly motivated about what they're going to do with their future in music. A lot of them go on to the big conservatories and music schools across the country. And it's just great to give them an experience of playing music at an incredibly high level. It's named the Frederick Fennell Ensemble because John Daniels, who really saw a need for having a band wind program at the school, got some donations and Frederick Fennell behind it. And so there's an endowment now to keep the wind ensemble program going at the school. So it's one of the highlights of the later stages of my career.
Yeah. So what is the school like?
Well, they take their academic classes in the morning, and then after 1:30, the program starts, and the kids are immersed in music theory, ear training. They have ensemble classes, master classes every week. They have sectionals on their band music. So that it becomes a real comprehensive program in terms of training them about how to practice, how to learn how theory interacts with what they're doing, and then playing their instruments. Actually, the school is 7 through 12. Excuse me, 7 through 12.
7 through 12. Wow. Do they audition?
So they audition. They have springtime auditions for the coming fall. And then they audition for the ensembles, and then we place them in the either symphonic band or wind ensemble.
Cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. It's a wonderful place to teach with some dedicated colleagues, all of whom are younger than me, which is always helpful.
You're still playing tuba?
I do. I play in several ensembles: Symphony Irvine, the Dana Point Symphony, La Mirada Symphony, and the Symphonic Winds of the Pacific, which I directed for 26 years. And when I retired from the college, I said, I just want to worry about one line of music now. So I play tuba in that ensemble.
I'm going to ask one more question here before we get to the final group, and that's not to point out a mistake, but what's a hard-earned lesson that you've learned that you'd want to spare someone from repeating?
I think be organized with the administrative side of your job, because there'll always be a deadline that you don't know about or have forgotten about that comes to pass, and then you can't take your kids on a trip, or you can't do this because you didn't take care of the paperwork. So there's the paperwork aspect, and then just being organized for your classes. I think one of the things that I would tell my younger self is to make more lesson plans after you got out of school.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm going to ask you that question in a minute, so
okay.
You're going to get another shot at that one.
Okay, great.
All right, Anthony, this has been great so far. Is there anything that you can think of that general about your story that you want to share before I go on to the final group of questions?
I think, whatever it is that you want to do, just make sure you go at it 100%. I was, people told me I was too late in my junior year about getting serious. And I think that that was the advice I got, but I really believe that when you make that decision, you need to go at it 100%, whatever that time comes. And, having taught elementary through college, it comes at different times, but the main thing is once you make that decision, just have to go for it. I would tell my students, whatever you do with your life, it has to be the last thing you think about in the morning and the first thing you think about it when you wake up. And I think that's when you know you're really committed to something.
Hey there, everyone. My name is Ann Molesky, and I'm the host of the Anna Krusik Podcast, another podcast in the Muted Network. It's my mission to help music teachers be more purposeful, sequential, and joyful in each and everything they do as teacher musicians. Join me every Thursday as I share tips, tricks, and meaningful conversations with other music teachers about how to make the general music classroom more intentional and impactful for both you and your students.
All right, so the first of my final questions, Tony, is where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
I think healthy is when you can do anything that will allow your students to grow as musicians and get the advice of a clinician or a adjudicator that will help make your ensemble better. I think that to me is the healthiest kind of experience you can give your students. It's unhealthy when you as a teacher lose sight of what your students are and what they mean to you for the sake of a rating or a concert. I think anytime that you lose who you are when you're doing something or working towards a goal, that's when it can become unhealthy. And then I think, the amount of things that you're doing, you have to really look at that and decide what's best for your students. If you're going to competitions because you have to do this to get this trophy or this award, then you have to ask yourself if that's best for the students. And anytime you don't have your students' best interest in mind, then it's unhealthy.
All right, so this is a question that many musicians and music teachers struggle with, but some also say that this is their identity, this is what they love. And so how do you personally find a work-life balance in your career as a music educator?
Well, it's always difficult because I can't think of any job at a high school level, say, that takes up more time than being a band director. And so, again, this whole idea of how much are you doing with the students, what's best for them, and then what's best for your personal life. Now, some people, it is who they are, and I can certainly understand that. But again, it's all about being organized and then making sure that in your personal life, you have planned things so that on this particular day and time, this weekend, we're going to do this, or, planning an evening out, or something that you put aside your work and then make sure you're dealing with your personal life. I think it's all about planning. Just like you would plan out your entire academic year, you have to plan your personal life as well.
Yeah, that can be hard.
Yeah, it is hard. I mean, there's I remember a colleague of mine did a survey about high school teachers, and this is 30 years ago, that said most of them last only 2.5 years in our business. And I think that's something we need to look at, because if we're doing so much that people are leaving, then we have to look at why.
Yeah, I think there's so many reasons why music teachers leave the profession. It's crazy.
Yeah, and most of the people that I speak to that have gone from high school to, say, junior high or middle school say they do that because they want to have a personal life. They have young kids and they want to see them grow up.
Oh, I've said this.
So I get all of that.
I do not hide the fact that I prefer teaching younger kids or college because I want to have that time outside of the teaching hours. I don't think I could teach high school again. I did it for 4 years, and boy, I worked hard.
Yeah, I did it for 7 years, and it was a difficult to have a personal life.
Yeah, it sure was. It sure was. Yeah.
But I think the main thing is just plan things with your significant other so that
they can't be changed.
It's not always, yeah, right. And this is what we're going to do, and this is what nothing's going to get in the way of that.
Good advice. All right, so this sort of bleeds together a little bit then, but what are the challenges facing music education, and how can we best meet them?
Well, from a band standpoint, this is something that I'm always questioning. Is we have so many kids who are involved in, just say, for lack of a better word, band, but yet they don't go on after high school, or they don't continue to have it as part of their life. And I think we need to address that challenge as music teachers. What are we doing that allows students at the end of their senior year to just put down their instrument and not pick it up again? What can we do to ensure that they're having a healthy experience and that they want to continue playing? I think that, to me, is one of the biggest challenges we have as music educators. Not so much in what we teach them, but how we can create an environment where they'll want to continue to play because they love it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had the same conversation with Patrick Dunnigan, who's the director of bands at Florida State, and he's really interested in why community bands don't have as much participation. Because if you think about it, community bands should be full.
We should be turning people away from community bands.
Right.
Or
starting new ones.
Right? Because of the fact that so many people have grown up playing the instrument.
Yeah.
So that's a big picture item that just continues to concern me.
Yeah, and I don't know I'd be interested to see if there's any solutions or any studies on that. That'd be an interesting thing to pursue. But
yeah, that would be.
Maybe a listener will chime in, and I'll let you know.
You youngins out there, get on this, because I think it's an important topic.
Yep, sure.
The other thing I think that's facing music education is how can we be inclusive of the entire student body? We need to be offering classes for a variety of classes that will allow students who maybe aren't in the band, orchestra, jazz band, choir track to come into our programs and get a real experience that they can live with for the rest of their lives as well. But again, that all comes down to money. It always does,
Yeah. I offered guitar classes when I was a band director. That brought in a lot of kids, but still not enough. Right. So, Anthony, if I were to give you a time machine and set it to the
okay, here we go.
And yep, here it is. And set it to the afternoon of your high school graduation. What would you tell yourself?
Be more serious about what it is you're doing when you declare a major, and go after it 100%. That would be. And really spend every waking moment immersing yourself in what it is you claim to want to be and want to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really good advice.
I think that it took me a long time to figure that out. But once I did, that was it. I slept, eat, breathed music, and still do today.
Yeah, no, you make me think. You kind of make me think about when I was in college, and boy, I really loved music. I would set the CD player above my head before I went to bed to like Debussy or whatever I was into at the time. And, the first thing I did was wake up and go to theory class. It was just like the whole day.
Yeah. Immersed.
Yep. Absolutely.
When I would tell my students at the college, I'd say, look, I didn't date much. I was more interested in learning my craft than anything else.
So, Tony, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you'd want to conduct, and why?
It would be the Armenian dances of Alfred Reed. And the reason for that is I've had a long history with that piece. it's near and dear to me for several reasons. It was an audition piece for several conducting challenges that I had during my career and my life, and it really speaks to me. And it's like an old friend, and it's something that we've had a long relationship with, both the first and second parts. So that would be the piece that I would choose to conduct for my final piece ever, put down the baton and go fishing.
Yeah, mine is Crown Imperial, the William Walton.
Ah, yes. Go out with a bang.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. All right, Tony, is there anything coming up that you would like to share or promote? I'm conducting the Orange County Wind Symphony here in Southern California, and we have a concert May 17th coming up. And it's an adult group that is an audition ensemble, and it's a joy to work with those marvelous musicians. And and at the OSHA School for the Arts, we're just having spring concerts coming up. That's about it. One of the great things about being a tuba player with the various orchestras and the Symphonic Winds of the Pacific is that I'm always telling my students, here's what our concert is. Come see if I can still hold up my instrument and get through a piece. So the kids always enjoy seeing their teachers perform. And I think that's critical for an educator to find something to play in that's better than what you see every day. And then that'll keep you going. Oh, there's no question. That's why I play in a community band. And, my wife goes down, she's a cello professor, but she goes down and plays at the Eastern Music Festival every summer with Jerry Schwartz. And,
sure.
They get to play the top of the line, with the best players in the world. And it really energizes everything, and even for me, being around that environment for 6 weeks really sort of energizes the year.
Yeah, well, the orchestras I play with are fairly decent. We did, with one orchestra, we did Bruckner's 8th Symphony last year to close out the season. And
you got to be able to play
La Mirada Symphony, we're doing Shostakovich 5 in 2 months. So that's going to be fun too. So
yeah, those are pieces that require players.
Yeah. I'm walking 3 miles a day to keep sure my lungs can get through those long notes. So it's a good time.
Yeah, I bet. All right, Tony, how can people get in touch with you?
Email is mazzdma@gmail.com. And phone is 714-328-3528 if they have any questions.
Excellent. Tony, thanks so much for your time.
Mark, thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.